I think only people who have gone through the writing process kind of understands the difference. First is between what's in your head and what's on the page, what you put down on the page. It's its own thing. It's not just going to follow what's in your
Hmm.
head. Like it has its own momentum and energy. Like a sentence follows a sentence. You don't know what the next sentence is until you write the sentence before it. Because so much of it is at first is you telling yourself the story because you don't know what the story is. And but at first the possibility is so great that you kind of are finding your way, choosing your way where to go. I'm very content in the sort of like mysterious relationship with my own writing.
Hey, I'm Jon,
I'm Cory,
and this is The Passage,
the podcast where authors break down their favorite pieces of writing
taking you behind the scenes from the first spark of inspiration
to the final edits and everything in between. I have been thinking a lot about joy recently, and I've been thinking about joy for a few reasons. The first is that I have a 2-year-old son, which, as anyone who has ever spent any time around children will tell you, means running through the entire range of human emotion, unattenuated, amplified, and in like constant 15-second intervals. Frustration, pain, sadness, sleepiness, hunger, rage. It doesn't matter. Whatever it is, it's on 11 all the time. But that goes for joy too, which he seems to find basically everywhere. A few weeks ago, we were coming home from a walk and I realized that I'd sort of timed it wrong. And we were going to get caught in this huge summer storm. And so the whole way home, I kept like anxiously checking my phone, which in this very dystopian way was like ticking down the minutes, like 8 minutes till rain, 7 minutes till rain. And we managed to make it to our little backyard just as the rain started coming down, and it was like coming down in sheets. So I grabbed him really fast and I kind of bolted for the door, and it was only a 10 or 15-second run, but I don't think he'd ever had that much fun in his life. He just exploded with laughter. And as soon as we got inside, he just kept repeating his little version of the word for rain over and over and over. And it struck me as one of the sweetest and simplest expressions of joy that I'd seen in a really long time. And the other reason is that not long after that, I got that little notification on my phone that said that I'd averaged 4 hours and 36 minutes or something of screen time that week. And I thought, how many of those hours and minutes spent mindlessly scrolling social media had brought me any real joy? And the answer was like very obviously none, or, very, very few. And the more I thought about it, the clearer it became that these technologies are sort of engineered to preclude the possibility of joy. They're too compulsive and too frenetic and too anxious. And that was all really depressing to think about, but it was also kind of a revelation. And all of this was swimming around in my head when I read The Memory Museum, the final story in the excellent new collection, also called The Memory Museum, by our guest today, M Lin. It's a story set in a near future version of China, but it's also about memories of the past and the creation of new memories in the present. And as one of the characters puts it, humanity's endless capacity for joy. It's a story that subverts the conventions of speculative fiction about technology and totalitarian states in some really interesting ways. It prominently features Beethoven's Ode to Joy, and is itself a kind of ode to joy, I think. It's a beautiful, hopeful, and moving story. And I'm thrilled to have M Lin on the podcast today to talk about how she wrote it. M, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to talk about this story too, because the rest of the book obviously has also a lot of reference to contemporary China and everything, and people have been really interested in talking about the censorship that's portrayed and all the all the other aspects that we're interested in in a totalitarian regime. But there's also this story in the collection that I haven't been able to talk about as much.
If you could sort of set up the basic premise of the story, and then we will let you take over and read the passage you selected.
Sounds good. So I think I want to give a larger context first, which
Sure.
is that the story collection is bookended with two speculative fiction stories. That first one is set sort of in a dystopian future. And then the last story, which is the Memory Museum, it's set what I think is more of a utopian future. And in this story, the narrator is a smell and taste artist for a technician for this museum called the Memory Museum, where people come to store their memories, both collective and private memories. So the museum has two wings. One is public memories, where the memories are sourced, so they are displayed in a larger facility and with more accuracy. And then there is a private library that people come to store their private memories, and you view those in a memory tank. And you get these, in addition to visual and the sound that we are familiar with, this tank are also equipped to provide you with the sensory cues.
Mm-hmm.
We start in the first week of the job, and she starts in the museum. She meets this boy named Lu Tian, and she immediately finds him fascinating and starts to be romantically interested in him. And we slowly uncover that her kind of history with this museum, where she has been visiting this museum since she was very young with her grandmother. And we witness her visiting one of these memories, which is actually her grandmother's memory, and her grandmother has recently passed. So, and she is the sole inheritor of this memory. Only she has access to this memory, in which we see that her parents were taken away by police. I'll also say the other main character, Lu Tian, also has his own memories in the museum that we get to see in the story, and that he works on the sounds of these memories in the museum. Yeah, that's good, I think.
Perfect.
Great.
Perfect.
So why don't you read the passage and then we can have a chat about it.
Okay. It took me years to uncover what I owed Lu Tian, my own memory of the afternoon when my father was first taken away. As the first step, I paused my visits to the library, shelving Lao Lao's reconstruction into the subconscious. Several years later, I requested its audio and olfactory profiles and experienced them strictly on their own. Initially only to the point I used to stop at, then all the way to the end, to the huge fight between my mother and Lao Lao, which started with Lao Lao telling my mother to give up what she and my father were doing and ended up in my mother packing up and leaving. Once I synced the profiles again, my brain cells went giddy, as if they were cooking up a big surprise but did not know the recipe. The fluster lasted a long time, straining my excitement into frustration. Often I thought about admitting defeat, but Lu Tian always managed to send me back to the memory tank, hopeful again. One day I left the two profiles playing on repeat and resigned myself to keeping my eyes closed. Very soon, time lost its grip on me. I couldn't count how many times they ended and started over again. At some point, toward the end of the cycle, the audio glitched, but I didn't open my eyes. The profiles continued playing, but the sound became faint, as if everything were happening far away. It was then that an unfamiliar image flickered. In Lao Lao's memory, after my mother left, we sat together in the living room, mindlessly watching a children's patriotic education program on TV. Now that the show's voiceover sounded more remote, I realized that my memory of those few minutes differed. I had not been with Lao Lao, but by myself in the adjacent room, looking out from 5 floors above, the TV's sound reaching me at a subdued volume. The unfamiliar image was familiar after all. It was of my mother in the courtyard, standing below our window with her suitcase. She bent her arms overhead, making the shape of a heart, and waved goodbye to me. In my memory, I could not hear her, but somehow she convinced me to move away from the window first, to return to Lao Lao in the living room, to resume the life of a child, with the show on TV, dinner on the table, and family by her side, so that I understood now her daughter did not have to imprint on her mind the image of her mother walking away, leaving her behind. That's the passage.
I want to continue the thread that I think Jon started and you had mentioned as well, because when I first read this story, I was primed to think of it in dystopian terms. I think that is the way that 9 out of 10 writers would have approached this idea of some sort of a near future memory museum. And I started reading and I found myself immediately thinking, okay, how can the memory museum go wrong? How can it be used for something nefarious or something that controls its citizens? And it took me a little while to sort of realize that that's not, in fact, what you were doing. And I ended up being really interested in it. I loved having my perceptions challenged in this idea of creating a hopeful future. And I find myself thinking a lot about the different memories in this story long after I read it. So I'm hopeful that we can get into all of that. But why don't we start? Can you just explain to us why you decided to pick, of all the passages that you could have picked from this story, what is it about this one that was so interesting to potentially talk about?
Yeah. This passage came very, very late in my editing experience. So we edited for about a year, and I had 2 major rounds of notes from my editor, which were great. But no one had really pinpoint on this point, which is that the reason that I'm really interested in exploring memories, as you can tell from some of the other stories in the collection, is how unreliable it is and how personal it is. And so very early on, that was in the first draft, this sentence where the grandmother, Lao Lao, says to the narrator that memories are unreliable. And I never found a way to come back to that. I never found a way to really demonstrate that in this story until very, very late in the process, that I kind of fixed everything that my editor wanted me to fix. But I really just wanted to somehow make this idea more pronounced and more kind of whole in the context of this story. And this passage finally came, like this idea that she actually has her own version of the memory. And and I think it also came from her exchange with the love interest with Lu Tian, where it seems natural that he would want her memory because they exchange memories, but he gave her his very private memories, but what she gave him was actually someone else's memory. It's not her own. So I feel like that equation also needed to be worked out. So this is where I kind of, among all the other things, where I became a very kind of staunch supporter of the editing experience and the revision experience. And I was very grateful that I was given the time to, because if I didn't, it was a whole year of rethinking about all these stories and how they come together. And in particular for this story, if I didn't have a whole year of time to still be thinking about this story after it was in my editor's hands, and knowing that it would be published, I couldn't have gotten here in the process. Yeah.
Was this change in response to something your editor had picked up on, or was it just sort of a sense that you had that there was an unfinished component?
It was more on my own, but I really, really liked when I sent this draft to my editor, what she said about it. She said something along the lines of, this new passage made her think about not only how we deal with our own memories, but also when everyone is making memories for other people. Like we are, and that's such a beautiful reading of the kind of my idea and how memories connect us and how we need that connection. Because in this passage, the mother is very intentional about what she leaves behind, what kind of memories she's making for her child. Yeah.
do you remember when you had the idea of, oh, here is how I can solve this thing that has kind of been nagging at me, as to how I sort of bring the idea of unreliable memory full circle?
Yeah.
Do you remember where you were when you had the idea, or what might have led to it?
I remember I was at this desk in my room. I have this tiny office in our 900 square feet place. But no, I don't remember how I exactly got to this. It was like at a point where like no one was going to tell me this story wasn't working if I didn't add this. Like I was very, very late in the editing process, and I was just kind of sitting here and thinking with myself. And this is a little bit of a tangent, but I was just we're going to talk about music, I hope. But I was just recently thinking about this lecture I watched of Andrew Schiff a long time ago, talking about the last sonata of Schubert's number 21 in A flat major, where he talks about how the sonata form, which is very strict with 3 parts, and the last part comes back to a repeat of the first part where the melody was first presented to us. And that kind of return is so satisfying in classical music, where it's a feeling of homecoming, and it's a feeling of tying a knot, a thread, a circle. And I think I was looking for that feeling in this story. I just really wanted to see that thread through. And it's something that I'm also, as I was saying, the quality of memory that I'm really, really interested in. But yeah, I don't exactly remember, like most good things in writing, where it came from.
But there's a really interesting like kind of voice shift or tonal shift, not in the paragraph that you started, but the paragraph above, which starts a new section. Was that part of unlocking this sort of resolution to the story, was to sort of zoom out and say, you know, like, this is really a new section of this story? Because from there to the end, it operates on a slightly different level than it had previously.
Yeah. That's so interesting you picked up on that. I think the tonal shift was a byproduct or a consequence of the moving time forward. Because then because from here on, the narration basically is from years later.
Right.
Yeah.
Was it always like that, or
Yeah.
it was always going to jump ahead?
Yeah.
You just had to sort of figure out how to bridge these two pieces?
When I had this idea, I was trying to figure out where in this chapter, in this new time jump, where that would fit. Yeah.
Am I right, Em, that if this passage in the earlier drafts, when this passage didn't exist, then the narrator is under the impression that the last glimpse of her parents that she sees is when they're kind of being taken away? The original sort of memory that Lau Lau shares. Am I right there that like this sort of recontextualizes what the narrator thinks about the last time that she saw her mother?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It never got here. So this is
and those
also
are very different things then.
Exactly.
Like this sort of violent government, whatever, is secret agents like taking away her parents, versus some sort of a voluntary, like we are making a very difficult decision to sort of follow our political instincts and to go out into whatever may happen, and like making a very difficult decision, but one that is completely of their own volition, as opposed to somebody else making the decision for them.
Yeah, because you're so right in that this whole kind of recontextualize and reinterpret a lot of things in this story. And I think because the narrator has set out to, she's in a funny spot where she does not blame her parents, because she kind of understands and supports the ideal that they fought for. But at the same time, as the child of these people, she feels abandoned. in some way, even though she doesn't want to let that affect her nature, which she thinks is a happy, joyful person. And that's what the memory of Beethoven, the symphony, tells her, is that they believed in the ultimate joy of their activism and doing this, and maybe hoping that their child would understand what they did. And but having this new passage in here adds on to that idea that her mother did not just abandon her, or her parents. And it was, as everything is a very complicated choice, and a choice that they had to make.
I'm curious what you discovered about the story that you were writing as you were writing this passage. What was new to you, or what did you already know and you just hadn't figured out how to say?
My process in general is I discover it as I discover it.
Yeah.
So, for example, I started this story with just like wanting to write a happy person. I just, in addition to like our kind of canon around dystopian future, I also, like literature is not so good at being happy. Most good literature are
right.
very heavy and very sad. And I just wanted to try, like, why can't I? And that's something music really, something about music that really draws me in, is that how the kind of level of emotion and joy that music is able to reach. But anyway, I started wanting to write a happy story, and I had this very kind of light, whimsy voice in my head, and started writing the narrator. And then, of course, I discovered that her parents are dead, and like all these heavy things start to come back into the story. But I actually didn't start out thinking that I was going to write about activist parents and they're dead, and this is a big thing in her life and all of that. So I really don't remember any preconceived knowledge about this passage until I was kind of just writing it. Yeah.
It must have felt like you'd sort of solved a puzzle in a way.
It did feel that way. Yeah. And I don't necessarily think that's how writing should feel sometimes, because I feel like I like it when it's like organic, even though the way I solved this was very organic, but I didn't want to it's not like a science,
right.
It's very, and I also don't believe like everything in short fiction is a little bit, has a higher kind of requirement of like everything has to matter to the story in some way. But I don't believe that, like, that's not how our mind or how our life works. Like we have all of this kind of extracurricular ideas. Yeah.
So how did you know to trust your instinct here and not say, you know what, this is a little too maybe clean?
Yeah.
That it was working better before when there was maybe a little bit less resolution.
Yeah.
How do you know who to listen to, which voice?
Yeah. I think it really irked me that I didn't come back to the unreliable memory idea. And I also realized after I wrote this passage that this kind of push the parental relationship, the what the character really is kind of grappling with in this story a lot deeper. So I'm actually, I think I'm pretty good at trusting my instincts in general.
Okay.
Yeah, once it feels right, you'll just know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It feels to me like it's very much in line, because M, you sort of mentioned that you wanted to write a happy story, and we were talking a little bit earlier about the utopia versus a dystopia. And even though the mother's making a very difficult sacrifice here, and the main character's feelings are obviously conflicted about it in the future, this end resolution of the mother-daughter relationship is much more hopeful to me than if the last memory is them essentially getting snatched off the street.
Yeah, yeah. It just like I set out to unlock or like piece one puzzle, but it feels like this should have been always been here because it
Hmm.
doesn't just fit into one idea. It really reconstructs a lot of things that's going on in the story.
Hmm.
Yeah. It's more like I discovered, I like uncovered it, that it was there. Yeah.
We've spoken to plenty of authors about this where they're well into drafting or even revisions until they finally land on what they realized was ultimately the thematic connecting tissue between their story or even the big idea. It, at first it surprised me to hear that an author could go for so long and get so deep into the writing process before realizing what was the heart of the story or the thing that that they really wanted to say, and to not have had that from the start as a guiding star. But it sounds to me a little bit like this is your process too, that you, in retrospect, you do feel like this is an incredibly important thematic, even from a narrative perspective, like the crux of the story, and yet it wasn't a part of the way of your creative process until almost the very, very end.
Yeah. And I think only people who have gone through the writing process kind of understands the difference first is between what's in your head and what's on the page, what you put down on the page. It's not always, it's just language is not able to capture that. And the writing process, it's its own thing. It's not just going to follow what's in your
Hmm.
head. Like it has its own momentum and energy. Like a sentence follows a sentence. You don't know what the next sentence is until you write the sentence before it.
Hmm.
And the other thing is that oftentimes the first draft, or even maybe when you think you're in revision process, because so much of it is at first is you telling yourself the story because you don't know what the story is.
Hmm.
Especially for short fiction, sometimes I go back more to like the first half of the story where I didn't know what the story is. I mean, the more you write, the less the few possibilities that are left out there for you to write. You like slowly narrow down the road. And but at first the possibility is so, great that you kind of are finding your way where choosing your way where to go. I'm very content in the sort of like mysterious relationship with my own writing. Like I
Hmm.
don't want it to be super I don't want to like intellectualize too
Hmm.
much. Yeah.
And it's really interesting. You said earlier that writing is sort of a discovery process of discovery, and you hear that a lot from writers that they really don't know where they're going as they start and as they start working through the story. But then you said something that I thought was really beautiful and really true, which is that there's also like an uncovering element to it. Like, and it reminded me of something I hear from songwriters more often, that like the song is out there, they're just sort of channeling it to the instrument or whatever, that the process of creation is more about just uncovering something that already exists. And I think there's something here in the passage you read that speaks to that. Like, this was always a part of the story. It's not really a discovery, it's more of an uncovering that
Right.
you just had to sort of get everything off of it so that it
Yeah.
could see the light of day.
It doesn't happen that often.
Right. I thought what
Yeah.
I was going to ask is like, how often does that happen? But then
No.
I thought
Yeah.
I'm not going to ask that question.
Yeah.
It's a good segue, maybe, John, with your hook about songwriting into the musical aspects of this piece. Em, could you give us, because I don't think when we were doing the original synopsis at the top of the show that we really dived into how this story interacts with music. Could you give us a little bit of a brief context there? And then I would just love to know where that comes from for you personally. Is that a
Yeah.
personal interest for you?
Yeah. So as the two main characters in the story start working in the museum, the the guy Lu Tian takes on a project that is a memory of a cellist who was playing in a symphony of Beethoven's Symphony Number 9, and I think right around the time I was writing this story, I did go see Beethoven's Symphony Number 9 at Carnegie Hall, but I did not know that it was going to be a story. And I started the story knowing that this love interest was going to be something around sound. The rest is a mystery to me. And it's so funny, like, so actually Pemi had made this joke with me where, because I went to visit this high school class and they read this story, and one question to me was like, where did you come up with the memory museum idea?
Mm-hmm.
And I have just no idea. And I was telling Pemi about this, and Pemi was like, you know, traded your own memory into the museum. So I have like so much like I don't remember so much about how a lot of this story came about. But I do remember that I did see a symphony Number 9 in person myself. And I had been maybe I was just listening to this and was just like, how I can make this into my story. I don't know. Yeah.
Okay. Then my next question, I want to talk a little bit about, let's get into your routine. So you don't know where these ideas come from. They just kind of happen. Whenever you have the idea of say, a memory museum, or you go to see Beethoven's Ninth and you think, I need to incorporate this some way into the story, what happens? Are you writing notes on your phone? How do you keep the idea? Does it just start spinning around in your head until you know how it fits into the piece that you're working on?
Yeah. I mostly write notes when I'm already in a story and I have these random thoughts that what can happen in the story. I will write them down in my notes app. And sometimes I have like a whole folder of like random ideas that I think could be story ideas that I do know. But with this kind of getting into a story, the start of the story, I just kind of sit down and start writing, because I am the kind of person who can't really think unless I'm actually typing and going into the world of the story. And
even though you don't really know where you're going at all.
no.
Yeah.
I just know a start somewhere, or you just start somewhere and kind of follow it. So the start really just kind of, once you sit here, you see a blank page, you decide what's the first sentence you're going to put down. Yeah. Because writing is such a writing and reading, both are such linear activities. Like to me, like what follows only, as I was saying before, what follows only comes when you have what's before. And so I do have a lot of notes, but I kind of just sit down and start. And that's the only way I can go forward. And it's sometimes really frustrating, and it gets like really, my thoughts get jumbled up because I have like held on to an idea for too long, that I really need to let it like unfold in words, because otherwise it's just starts to get frustrated. I actually made this analogy as like, it just feels like constipation. Like you really do need to just get it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think one sort of common theme in the interviews that we've done, I mean, Cory and I both have a background in editing, and Cory has a background in journalism, as a newspaper writer, and I've done a bunch of nonfiction writing. But whenever we talk to novelists or fiction writers, there's this sense of like, how exactly do you come up with the next thing? Like, what is that? Explain what that looks like when you just sit down at a blank page and you just come up with the next event or thought.
But the converse is true, where I find writing nonfiction really, really hard.
Right.
Because everything's already out there. How do you decide what makes a story? You have so many, I don't know. And they are facts, so you can't change them. But you have to make a story out of it. I find that really hard.
Yeah. Does sitting down without any sort of outline or a plan, does that lead to a lot more revisions? Because I would imagine, say, on day 3, maybe in the course of just sitting down to write and seeing what pops out, you have a
Yeah.
really great idea, but now you need to go back and you need to rewrite the beginning to
Yeah.
incorporate this great idea throughout the piece. And
Yeah.
that could sort of happen in many iterations as you're going.
Yeah, that does happen in my process. And sometimes, again, it feels frustrating because on this day, I have to go back earlier in the story to write something that have to make sense for the later part. Then in my mind, I haven't made progress linearly further along the road in the story. So, but yeah, that does happen. And I think part of me maybe is because the way I write fiction now, maybe it's a kind of a I wouldn't use trauma, but something similar to a trauma response to my screenwriting attempts. I went to film school, and how screenwriting is taught to people is that you work on the plot, the story, until you have everything figured out, and then you go into actually writing the pages of the story, which includes the action and the dialogue of what people actually say. And I was always working in that mode, writing kind of character biography, kind of like imagining the whole life of these characters and go into story kind of treatment beat by beat to figure out the plot. And sometimes because the nature of the business or whatever, like I never even get to write the actual stories, and like I don't hear these characters talking to each other at all. And I think when I started writing fiction, because I don't have to work with anyone, like I don't have to show anyone what the story is, I was only working with myself, and I really, really enjoyed that process of not knowing and following the story itself. And I think I just have been so lucky that with writing this book, I have kind of just happened upon and landed onto mostly the right beginning. But for the novel I'm working on, like I've already restarted 3 times. So I haven't found the right kind of, it's again, the uncovering, like I haven't found the right thing.
Yeah. I was going to ask how often you get into a story and realize it's just not, like, it's either not working as it is or it's just not going to work, period. And you should just scrap it and do something else. Does that happen?
I have been writing fiction for not very long. So, and miraculously, that has not happened.
And maybe it won't. Maybe that's, maybe it's just a matter of sort of finding a place for everything you're writing so that you're not throwing stuff out.
Yeah, so I did have like, I think 2 stories, maybe something in this collection where it was a story that I wrote a draft of the story and I realized that it's not working, but I'm still interested in the story. And then I just rewrote the story. If I didn't tell you, you probably wouldn't even recognize that they are the same story. But in my mind, they're the same story.
Interesting.
Yeah. So that's kind of been my short story revision process.
Do you have any sense of how long it took you to write the Memory Museum, either whatever the initial first draft is, or from the very first time that you started writing to when you made the revisions that included the passage that you read and when it was actually finalized?
Yeah, the story, right? You're talking about. Yeah. The story, the first draft was written in a month. I know this because I was in a workshop. So this story was probably written in around like March or April 2023. And I had already started, I got an agent in October 2023. So between that, I had revised it enough to have a book manuscript to send it out to agents.
Okay.
Yeah. And then we edited for a year with my editor. And I did a little bit with my agent, and then we, the whole process of going to editors and editing with editors.
Your revision process seems surprisingly public. like you workshopped this story, then it was an agent.
Yeah.
A lot of different people involved in it. Is that unusual? Is that just for this story, or in general has your creative process usually involved the input of a lot of different people and voices?
These stories in this book, I actually did write all of them in my MFA. I basically wrote all the first drafts in about a month because I was writing for my workshop deadlines, and they all went to right away, as like fresh off of my mind. And that's kind of been my process for this book. But now I no longer have that. And I don't think I want to do that anymore. Yeah.
Why?
I think especially with a novel, I think honestly, these stories, none of them were very far away from their first draft. And so I think these stories were just, again, I feel like waiting to be found. And, I only just started writing fiction then, like for about a year. And I started writing fiction in September 2020, and I started a MFA program in September 2021. So I was a very new writer, and I didn't have any kind of fears or inhibitions about any kind of writing. And I wrote and I put it out there. And I feel like people who have been writing for longer actually are more hesitant about sharing their work. And I think this also is the credit to the program, my cohort and everything. Like everybody was nice enough not to like crush me. But now I think with a longer project, with a novel, it's not something that I could hold in my head at a time all at once. The world is so big in a novel that I kind of want to explore and figure out my own mistakes. And when I'm ready to share, I will kind of share with my trusted readers. Yeah.
Do you have any writing process rituals or things that you're, precious about that have to be a certain way?
I try not to have it because I feel like this is something I like to tell other people also. Like I used to, when I was writing screenplays, I always feel like I have to at least have a solid hour in front of my computer. I can like get into the zone but now I just feel like our lives are so busy and overwhelming, and it's so hard to, being in New York City and having other responsibilities. It's so hard to find solid time. So like if I only have 20 minutes before having to go out of the door, I'll write like a little bit of something. And also that takes off pressure of your writing, like because I know I will have to come back and revise and rewrite this, and every sentence is only a draft of a better sentence. And so that's, I try not to be precious about things, but I have my favorite. Like I still like to be in this room and in front of my computer. Yeah, I can't write longhand. Writing longhand makes me feel like a child.
Okay, so something we ask all of our guests that we have on the show is if they could hear anyone else talk about their process in the way that we're asking you, who would it be?
Elena Ferrante.
Yeah.
Okay. The mysterious Elena Ferrante.
Yeah. She
Why?
talks so... Well, first of all, some of it seems so real that you just like... How do you... I often think about how you make fiction feel so real, as if this is something that happened and you just like basically wrote it down. And that seems easy, but it's not. Like it's like what details make it feel real.
Sure. Yeah.
And her stories also feels like so whole. Like it just seems like you have to already know what the whole story is when you wrote the story. But I guess probably that I doubt that is the process. And the way that, she's able to hide from the world.
Right.
And
right.
and that's the thing I kind of like, am now in my kind of early stage of being a public author
Yeah.
that I'm wrestling with is that I wrote this first book. I mean, everyone did the first book, not knowing if it would ever be published, anyone would ever read it. And so you have this, at the same time, a hopelessness, but at the same time, the privacy that you are able to work with. And that's very, very important for writers, I feel like. And now I have an agent, I have an editor, I have worked with a publisher who I think likes me, hopefully will hopefully publish my next book. So the possibility of getting published, getting read is much bigger than much more likely than when I worked on my first book. So now how to get all of these people out of your head when you're writing, and she has that.
All right, should we do some quick rapid fire questions and then we will wrap it up?
Sounds good. Yeah.
So, what is one aspect of writing you think you're particularly good at?
Idea.
What's one aspect of writing you think you're bad at?
I don't know. Grammar?
Grammar. Okay.
That's a great answer.
Yeah.
I'm already going to break the rapid fire format here because I do want to hear about this a little more. What was harder to write for this story, the first line or the last line? And I say that knowing that the last line is not even a bit of text, but is actually musical notation. So I guess what took you longer to sort of come up with, and how do you approach that process?
If I had to compare, it was the last line that took longer. The first line was just me and the narrator talking, and I started from there and went from there. Yeah.
How long did it take before you arrived at the idea of, oh, it doesn't even have to be words that end the story?
Not very. I think once I got to that moment, and I'm of the philosophy that I believe in the philosophy there's nothing you cannot do. And in writing, and anything.
Rules were made to be broken.
Yes. Anything you want to do, as long as you can do it well and you know why you're doing it, you should do it. And who says there can't be music in writing? Yeah.
What's the first thing you edit out of a draft?
Let me think. Probably like dialogue tags. Yeah.
So he said, she said, or
yeah.
Just because you don't need it.
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, I believe the best dialogue don't need them because you should know who's talking from their voice.
Right. Right.
Well,
Yeah.
in this story, doesn't even have
The
quotation marks.
Yeah. And they're mostly needed when it's a back and forth that it's kind of hard to tell. Yeah.
What's a word you always misspell and autocorrect saves you?
I misspell so many words because English is not my first language, so
Everything you're doing is automatically more impressive than anything John and I do because you're working in a second language.
So I misspell a lot. Like I can't even name it. Yeah.
How many titles did the Memory Museum go through before you landed on this one?
The story or the book?
Or both?
Actually, just this.
Yeah, that was it?
Yeah.
For both.
For both.
Well, the story was the very last one that you wrote, right? So at a certain point, were you thinking about the collection with a different title or a different thematic?
I just never had a title, and I thought the Memory Museum, not because this story is so important, but I like to have memory in the title, and also I think this book is a memory museum for me and people I know. Yeah.
You mentioned this a little bit earlier. You don't write longhand. Do you work in Google Docs, Word, some other program?
Scrivener.
What do you like about that you don't like about the other program?
Word is just not good. And and I often talk about this with my editor, is that I'm so surprised that there is not a editing software that's better than Word.
Yeah.
You have to scroll through all the pages. And but I like Scrivener actually most about their feature that goes full screen. So there's nothing else on the screen, just the words. Yeah.
Music, TV, podcasts in the background, or just silence when you're writing? What do you like to listen to?
Music.
Music?
Yeah.
Classical music?
Often, but all kinds of music. I have a really kind of wide range, eclectic taste of music. And sometimes I listen to a lot of electronic music also writing. And that seems like more like trancey music. And sometimes I listen to like pretty loud kind of alternative rock and pop stuff also. Yeah.
Or do you have specific playlists, or are you finding things on YouTube, or do you have kind of a curated selection of tunes?
I tried to, when I was kind of trying to work on a novel about my kind of boarding school experience, I made a list of a playlist that the music I listened to when I was that age. But mostly I just pick on the day when I start writing. Yeah.
Okay, our last question. What is your go-to procrastination method?
Oh, this is bad. I have so many hobbies, like playing piano, but I don't want to say that's procrastination. Probably playing with my cat.
That's another good one. I can heartily endorse that one. I don't think you need to feel bad about
playing
that.
with my cat and my dog. Yeah. Yeah.
Perfect. Excellent. Thank you so much for being a guest on the show. It's super fun to talk to you.
This was so fun.